Hi all, welcome to this really awesome webinar with Lee. I'm so excited for him to be bringing this content to us. Lee works with Publishizer, which is an amazing platform to help you launch your book into the world, sell pre-orders, and also with the weight of those pre-orders as proof of concept in the marketplace, be able to pitch to publishers and land a better publishing deal. So I really love what they do. They do something really unique and different in the publishing world, and it's an industry that really needs that. So I love the work that Lee does, and also with Guy at Publishizer, and he's come on board to help us unpack a little bit about the publishing industry. So it's quite complex. There's lots of different parts and lots of different options as an author. So Lee's here to talk us through all of that. Hi, Lee.
Yeah, hey Catherine, it's really good to be here. We're going to talk about how to get your book out there and maybe a little bit about what Publishizer does. But I think the biggest thing is the information out there in the market is definitely kind of hidden or non-existent for authors, and hopefully I'll touch on that a bit today.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you've got prepared for us.
Definitely. So I'll dive right in. So this here is how most authors do see publishing. There basically are two sides. So there's self-publishing on the right-hand side with the service publishers who take on a lot of books and simply produce and print for you for upfront costs. And authors can self-publish without a service publisher, but for the purposes, we're assuming you're not going to do the printing and everything else on your own. So Amazon, for instance, is a self-publisher, or they are a publisher, and they use Ingram to print. You also have Mascot and hundreds of other service publishers who help you get your book up on platforms and in front of readers. But then on the other side, there are these traditional publishers who take on fewer books, they offer royalties, they pay high advances, and they have retail distribution and good editors. And the big five are the first that come to mind, since those are the ones that everyone really knows and seeks out, like Penguin, Macmillan, Hachette, HarperCollins, and Simon & Schuster. But publishing is really a lot more than that, and there are literally thousands of credible options out there. So this is a bit more of what it actually looks like, which includes traditional publishers on the left, and then you have independents, hybrid publishers, and of course service publishers still on the far right. And these are just a small amount of the thousands of publishers out there. So big five publishing houses alone, they have hundreds of imprints, and these are just some of the authors or some of the publishers that we work with on the screen. But in reality, this whole slide would be completely filled with good publishing options. And they all bring different things to the table at varying degrees of quality. So it's not always about the biggest and the best. It's really about finding the right fit for your book. And the next book may be a different best fit with another publisher. Each new book is a brand new journey most of the time. And the biggest factors are listed here, such as upfront costs, whether they pay advances, royalty rates, and of course, credibility. So going like a little bit deeper into the independent side and the hybrid side, they are definitely the newer types of publishers. I mean, independent publishers have always been around. You have traditional small presses, and there's tons of things that they offer, but at very different levels. They can offer different things. And then hybrid publishers are probably the newest introduction to the publishing world. They're kind of a mix in between traditional and self-publishing. But I think it really matters on what the upfront costs are. So you move up the ladder from the right to the left into the big five and traditional. It's really about the upfront cost. So are you going to pay directly for their services, or are they going to acquire your book and push it out there on their own? And obviously the way that they structure their payment is a bit different. So you have royalties on the left, and they will take a percentage after the book is sold, and they'll help you with editing and production and marketing. Whereas on the right side, it's just, hey, pay me an upfront cost, I will produce your book, and then hopefully it sells books on, once you get it on these platforms, and then you take 100% of the royalties. Independents and hybrids are very much on the in-between. And, there's so many out there, no contract is exactly the same. But I guess what you can expect with independents and hybrids are better editing than what you get on your own. Sometimes they offer royalties, sometimes they pay advances, sometimes they have retail, but not always. But they are definitely a more credible option than, let's say, self-publishing on your own.
Yeah.
So quality and credibility are definitely the big factors moving up and down the chain here, but you can expect lower levels in self-publishing and much better in independent and small presses. And of course, the highest quality and perceived credibility on the far left with the big five. But I mean, you really have to go deeper than common knowledge on this before you can have a really satisfying publishing experience. Most authors really don't do due diligence on what these publishers have to offer. So they have false expectations. So the information is out there. It just takes some research. And these here are really the basics. And once you know this, you're going to know more than the average author and some things that may not be so obvious even on the next slide. Part of the reason, and not the entire reason, that quality remains at the top, which would be with these big five publishers, is because of these gatekeepers or literary agents, right? So once you start producing high quality books and you have tons of successful authors under you, then every author wants to start working with you. Typically how things work, right? So these publishers, their inboxes are completely overcrowded with proposals and queries from authors, and they really don't have all the time to go through every single one, read every single book, and find the good ones and publish them. So literary agents emerged as a way to filter out the good from the bad. It's very much become a way to chase a paycheck for them, or at least it has been over the past maybe decade or so. And instead of passing along the highest quality books every chance they get, literary agents often will take a 15% cut on the paid advances and then royalties. So a lot of times their incentive is to only push through books, that have really high advance, like a 50K advance or 100K advance, because of course they're going to benefit directly. And then those amazing books and those great debut authors who could get published, but they just don't have that high advance rate. They're not going to get pushed through, or they're not going to get queried because the agent doesn't make enough money. It's a pretty big downfall of traditional book publishing, but authors still try to go for it because there's so much credibility and getting picked up by a publisher. Of course, they have great editing, they have distribution, they have authority with retail. The alternative is self-publishing, and average statistics really, they don't benefit the authors in terms of sales. So you have these other alternatives in addition to that, independents and the hybrids, all offering varied degrees of different things. And crowdfunding is definitely a way to get in front of these guys, but I can touch on that a bit more later.
Fantastic. What I've personally found trickier to kind of guess and explain to clients is the independent and the hybrids. I've found that they have quite a range of time. Like some, maybe they will do it a bit more quickly, but a lot of them kind of take the one and a bit, maybe 1.5 years even as well. But that's more, I'd love to hear more of your experience. You've got much more experience in the US.
Yeah, definitely. So time to publish is definitely a big factor. And once you get into US versus UK, Australia, all the other geographic places that these publishers exist, I think this kind of holds true with all of them. But in terms of time to publish your book, it's of course going to take longer the more traditional you go, the more you move to the left here. And this has to do with a lot of factors, such as manuscript submission deadlines, editing process, book marketing planning, fitting the calendar dates with these publishing schedules, and of course management time if you have an actual publishing team, which if you go to the left, you definitely have a team, and on the right, usually it's just you, or there's less people. So for traditional teams, they will decide on a date, usually 3 to 4 times per year. They launch batches of authors that they publish, and that they'll push these guys out in groups and provide like resources to hit these guys' goals. And a lot of authors like to rush the process, and they say they don't want to wait for a traditional publisher because it takes too long. And I'm always really curious why that is, actually, because if you want to rush your book, for no other reason than because you don't want to wait, then by all means, you can definitely do that. There's always self-publishing. Probably a hybrid model might be good for you, and submitting it to Amazon, who will kind of take your book, no questions and no help. But it's not really going to make a huge difference from 1 month to 1 year. And publishers know that, even if the author disagrees. So I do suggest that authors take your time, vet your options, produce the highest quality book you can, and see if you can get a retail distribution from a credible publisher. The alternative is not often a lucrative or credible option. And then of course you have these tons of other different times on the in-between with these independent and hybrid. It's just always going to get more timing the further left and the more traditional that you go.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'd love you to chat more about US, UK, and Oz. Obviously, a lot of my clients are based in Australia, but some do really want to break into the US market. Haven't had too much interest in the UK, but it would be really good to hear about the 3 different locations.
Yeah, the difference, I mean, this is a question that is often asked, and what the difference is and how authors should plan for these differences across countries. I mean, they all have varying degrees of distribution and readership that these publishers can get you into. And it all has to do with the topic and the content that the specific publisher or the acquiring editor wants to take on. So books that have done well with a specific publisher in the past are definitely a good indicator of the types of books that they're looking for going forward. So, number one is always this topic and content. That's definitely the main criteria in terms of the difference in these publishers across country lines. After that, it's really about you, the author. What is your readership? Where is your platform? Do you have a loyal following? And let's say you do have a loyal following in the UK, but you think your audience may be in the US or Australia, for example, and maybe that's the case, but you're not likely to get a publisher unless you can prove some sales and some readership with your current following first in the UK. And it starts with where you are. And then it expands outwards online or into retail distribution. So if you look at your blog following, if you look at analytics on visitors to your website or the stats of your social media follower engagement, that's where you should focus on publishing and pushing out your book, because those are the people that are familiar with you. And then you need to think about how many thousands of people are going to buy this book. And then a publisher will expand that into the tens of thousands or 100,000s across borders. Catherine, does that make sense?
That is fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. So, and these bigger publishing houses, they tend to make book deals based on English speaking language. And then they translate to other languages later on, and they'll partner with local publishers to make that happen wherever these local people buy.
Yep. Would Bloomsbury have partnered with Scholastic? I would have thought Bloomsbury would have had like international rights to publishing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that's it's just something that these publishers don't promote. Authors don't often know. This information is not that public, or it's not made public. So, yeah, for instance, J.K. Rowling, she published her book. This is her third book, but it's basically her entire series. This is what her book looks like in the publishing world. And it's a very small snapshot, but her UK publisher was Bloomsbury. And then they did partner with Scholastic for the US, and then they partnered with Gramedia in Indonesia, and then another publisher in Korea, and another one in all these other countries. So it's all about that access to readership and the distribution, and no publisher can do it all on their own. So you need to partner with other publishers who have, that authority with retail, who have access to readership. And it's all about partnering. And this is very common for publishers at every level to do. Even with smaller traditional hybrids and independents, they will usually focus on their home country in ebook sales, because they have more of a limited retail partnership in bookstores. And of course, they'll get you online. But partnerships, it's all about these increasing the distribution, the authority with bookstores, and the readership. So partnerships are definitely a big thing that you'll experience if you get one of these publishers to take you on.
Awesome. So can we now take it back a little bit and really look at, in the first place, why would an author really want a publisher?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the process of getting interest in working with one of them, with a publisher, it's long and it takes a lot of work. But so does just publishing a book, whatever path you take. Self-publishing, it takes a lot. But authors usually think that their book is worth it, and so is their credibility. So you want it done right. And, there's still always that question, why would you want a publisher, at least on the traditional side? And of course, the things I mentioned in the previous slide, these are super important. The big three are, the retail, the credibility, and obviously people want the highest quality product that they can manage. And authors tell me all the time that they can do these three things on their own, especially that last one. And even if an author can do that last one on their own, if they can produce a high quality product with a great printer, they have great designers, and they work closely with these people, they're still missing these other two hugely important aspects of a really successful book launch. And if you don't want all three of these things, or if you're not sure if you need them, that's totally fine, but you're likely not ready to, become a bestseller. And again, it's not always about getting the biggest and the best publisher. It's about finding the right fit for your book. And you have thousands of really good, credible options.
Fantastic. That's really good to see broken down. The biggest question of all that everyone wants to know is, how do you land a traditional publisher? How does one actually, do you go through the literary agents? I personally know, not personally, anyway, I know that in Australia you can still submit to some traditional publishing houses cold, but I'm pretty sure the States you pretty much always need a literary agent. Can you confirm whether that is correct for the States, and then how do you go about it?
Yeah, so number one, the agent is always the first thing that people think. So, we work with hundreds of traditional publishers, and you do not need an agent. Some publishers, maybe 5% of these big guys, they say, I will only accept agented submissions. So go find an agent, go push out to these guys. But 95% of every publisher, they're looking for new books. They're looking for platforms that have author discovery, and they don't need an agent. So there are definitely other paths that you can take. Whether you go with an agent or not, these things are always what these publishers are going to look at. So it's always going to start with the topics or the preference of that acquiring editor, or the topics that that publisher wants to publish or market. So again, if you do some research on the publishers that you think may be a good fit, if they don't publish your genre, or they don't typically publish nonfiction, or they typically don't publish a genre of your fiction book, it's not a good thing to pursue them, because you're just going to hit a dead end. So the first thing that they're going to look at is this strong proposal with keywords. That's going to tell publishers if it's going to do well in the market. So again, if you do this homework for the publisher, it's just like you would for an investor or a job interview, or even if you go approach a literary agent. Your proposal is your business plan, and that should tell them why they'd want to acquire your book, and who your target audience is, and what pain point your book solves. Or if it's a fiction, you need to have a very compelling plot summary. All of that goes into the first 2 points here with the topic and the proposal. And then the next 2 points, obviously, platform is super important. You need to show them email list or a following in your blog or social media. This is a pretty important thing, but it's not always a deal breaker if you don't have a large platform. Quality of topic definitely helps out here. And then, of course, that last point, improving you can sell your book. Pre-orders actually are a pretty good way to get publishers' interest without a large platform. So publishers are always about reducing risks in acquiring titles or investing in an author. So you prove you can sell, you get some pre-orders and some readership, and your proposal is really great. Publishers will definitely express interest in working with you. And again, you don't need an agent for any of this thing, or for any of these things. We've had big 5 publishing deals and independent deals without any agent whatsoever. So I'll touch a bit more on these pre-orders a tad bit later, but it's all about getting readership first. So here's a resource that we share with a lot of authors. If you want a link to it, you can email me directly, and I can send you a link after the presentation. I can also share these slides. I know it's a lot of information. I can share these slides as well with anyone who wants them.
Fantastic, that would be amazing. Now, obviously with traditional publishing, which we've been talking about, you don't have to handle any of the shipping, and even hybrids. But so this is more really looking at people who are choosing to just self-publish, do the service publishing. What is the best approach to shipping and managing that yourself?
So the best way to approach shipping is really to first figure out where your readers are. So you need to think about the people who are actually going to buy your book, and then how to get it in their hands. And this is actually easier than it seems. It's really just about giving yourself some cushion to cover your expense. So if we look at the 3 main or most popular ways to publish your book, Catherine, like you said, self-publishing, and then you have Amazon, and then of course there's that traditional independent. So with self-publishing, shipping costs are not really that major of an issue, since buyers are likely people that you know. So adding $3 to $5 on top of your book price, on a per book price, this is the best practice. And then with Amazon, shipping is done by Ingram or one of their print-on-demand partners. So again, just give yourself a cushion of $3 to $5 shipping, and you probably want to do max $5 because once people get the payout and they see a large shipping, they're often going to bounce, and you're not going to get that reader. So it's actually using your shipping to ensure people go through the payment more so than covering your costs. And that can seem counterintuitive, but that's really the best way to approach your shipping. And then on the traditional side, yeah, least of your concerns because they have distributors and they have partners. So you're not involved as much in the pricing and logistics of your book. You basically just receive a paycheck each month from the publisher. And then independent is really the same way. You have a lot more control and involvement with them, but really I would defer to the top 2 points for the independent. So to get an idea for your shipping costs, just think about how you're actually going to sell your book and start with the people that you know. That's probably step number 1.
Fantastic. Common sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, use common sense. Use common sense. Okay, so the bestseller, this is something I just want to touch on real quick because it's a common end goal for many authors, and it kind of has to do with shipping and copies sold, but these here are the most popular bestseller lists in that every single best-selling list measures a limited number of quality of sales in a few places, or it's curated by a small group of people who are deciding on what to put on their list. And they're usually picking books based on what they think are most important, not always based on what's selling, but that's not always the case. If we look at all the stats from all these bestseller lists, velocity of sales is probably the most important thing that you should consider. So the time it takes to get those sales and what actually you need to land on them. So I would say most authors are not going to hit this number, but it's at least a good benchmark for you to have and at least vetting your expectations. So for example, 3,000 in the first week is likely the first step to get on a USA Today or a Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And then you have 9,000 the first week for a New York Times. And you'll likely need a publisher in order to get those last 2, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. They usually go with a credibility play. If you don't have a publisher to back you, they're probably not going to put you on the list. So that's where Tucker Max comes in with this every list is a lie. And while that's somewhat true, it's still very valuable to get on these lists because when your book has that bestseller sticker, people are far more likely to buy. So I just want to give this quick snapshot of what this bestseller actually means and how to obtain it.
Now, that's really good. I've seen, as far as Amazon is concerned, I'm not sure. I just know that I met someone who wrote a book in the business category, and for Australian Amazon, I think he said he sold 2,000 copies or something, and that made him a bestseller. And in different conversations I've had with different people, like I feel like bestsellers lost a lot of its almost credibility in how often I've seen speakers stand on stage saying they're a best-selling author. And I think it's often in this weird kind of Amazon category of bestseller that's slightly wishy-washy. So obviously for us in Australia, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Times is all pretty American-based. What would you say? Do you know what any kind of credible sources of a bestseller list are for an Australian audience?
So if a publisher wants to get you on a bestseller list, it's not always about geographical lines. It's about English-speaking audiences. But yeah, I would say these are just a few of like the most popular that I think most authors we work with are going for. But there's always lists that you can get onto. So Amazon, of course, is probably the most popular. And it is credible. It's not in the days where an Amazon bestseller is not credible because it definitely is. It's just easier to obtain. Amazon, the way that they run things, they want authors to be happy. They want authors to keep submitting books to them and become a bestseller. And it does play into it because not everybody can get that bestseller. But if you play with their algorithms, you're very strategic. You can become an Amazon bestseller with a couple hundred sales on a Sunday in your category. That's really how they operate. So yeah, it's a popular thing to do, but definitely not as credible as like these other 3 on here. And every country is different. So I would say the best thing you can do is see what bestseller lists are most relevant to the people in your network and try to see which criteria they have for hitting it. But I suspect it's going to be similar to these lists here in terms of how to get on them.
Okay, awesome. That's great to know.
So then I just want to lead back into the pre-orders because I touched on it before, but pre-orders are actually a pretty interesting thing in book publishing, and publishers like pre-orders because touching on the bestseller, they can fulfill all of your pre-orders in just one day. So it gives them control once they approach these lists. So you want to sell pre-orders and you want to get publisher because no matter what, they're going to get your book further. So if you do pre-sell, if you do pre-sell 1,000 to 3,000 pre-orders, you'll likely have publishers bidding on your book. And not more than that, it's a very personal way to sell your book. So for instance, if we talk to independents or hybrids, or we talk to smaller presses, or even traditional like HarperCollins and Rodale, they all run pre-order campaigns with their authors. So Mark Manson, for instance, he offered personal haikus for his readers who bought 3 copies or more. Neil Patel, he did free SEO coaching for everyone who bought 10 copies or more. So pre-order campaigns, you're more likely to do well with publishers. And even if you don't like the publishers that express interest based on these pre-order sales, you're always going to have these upfront funds to go publish a book on your own and have a better experience than you would without these pre-order sales. So I would definitely recommend authors do run pre-order sales.
Fantastic. That's awesome. It's such a great strategy for publishing. To be honest, I think the last question is what the final slide is about, is to share a little bit more about what you guys at Publishizer do. So going, pre-orders, that might be something worth looking at more, or maybe I could do that to get a traditional publishing deal. I'd love for you to touch on that.
Okay. So all of this stuff are things that we do at Publishizer. We help authors write proposals, we help them run pre-order campaigns, and we help them get deals with publishers. So even if you sell a lot of books, even if you land on a USA Today bestseller, or if you land on any bestseller whatever country you're in, publishers still aren't going to come to you. You have to go to them. You have to do the work in order to get this retail distribution and sell hundreds of thousands of copies. So, this is the stuff that we do at Publishizer. And if you want to learn more, you can go visit us at publishizer.com, or you can email me directly. I can send you these slides. I can send you that resource about gaining book subscribers. And yeah, these are just a few of the authors that we've worked with here that have gotten these traditional and independent book deals.
That's awesome. Can you quickly touch on a little bit more about how the campaign works, like how long it is, what they need ready to be able to do a campaign with you guys and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so what authors really need is what I touched on in a couple slides back with what it takes to get a publishing deal. So a proposal, they need a great topic, and then they need to sell pre-order sales. So it's really a methodical process. It really doesn't take a lot of time. Basically, it's what you can do in the pre-launch phase. So let's talk about your topic, and then what do we need to build a great proposal, and then how do we get it out there in front of publishers? And then, of course, marketing is a big deal. If you want to get 1,000 pre-orders, or you want to get hundreds of copies of your book sold and get interest, there's definitely things that authors need to focus on that isn't common knowledge. But selling your book is usually a new thing to authors, and this is definitely the things that we help our authors with.
Fantastic. Awesome. And how long is your campaign?
Our campaign is 30 days. Usually what we find is that when you launch a book, the first 30 days are the most critical. And it's usually, if you devote your time to 30 days, you're going to exhaust your personal network. Then after that, it's all about getting it into your extended network, podcasts or blogs, or getting your sample chapter in a major publication. These are things that we also help you with, but 30 days is the typical time to run a pre-order campaign. In our case, you crowdfund your pre-orders on our platform. So there's no one right path for every single author, but there is definitely a formula that if we stick to, you stand the best chances of getting a publisher and hopefully getting your book into some retail.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Lee. This has been really, really awesome. I can't wait to share it with everyone. It's really good to have content shared and so succinctly and well as well. Like you say, it would take a lot of time to kind of come across this research on the internet yourself. So I really appreciate you putting this all together for us.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thanks for having me. And, if there's any other questions, I know it's a lot of information, but, if you want the slides, I'll share them. And if there's any other questions, again, here's my email, or Catherine, or probably quite a bit about this stuff as well. Authors can never have enough information. So always ask questions, always seek out information. And then hopefully these resources are a good start.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time you've put into this.